A little bit about what really encouraged me originally into medicine and left Trinidad in 2015, basically because it used to be a doctor in Trinidad, but I have was one hand, and there was limitation in terms of what I perceived as opportunities for people with disabilities or people with that looked like myself to have different opportunities to pursue dreams. Just my dream, which is to become a physician. So I left Trinidad on my own and I said, I want to be a doctor if I can be here. And at that point, I was a little bit afraid actually about what it meant to pursue medicine because, again, having disability and also not having seen many Black women physicians and more so a Black women physicians that have a visible disability. That's a very unique niche really was something that made me wonder, is it possible to pursue medicine? When you see doctors in England, they always show two hands moving actions, right? They never show a single hand of what it's capable of. But my mission currently is like to show like my name is Future Dr. Valley, living lives one hand at a time. It's my inspirations here. Remember that if there is a dream to do working in active community, it's always possible with a desire to pursue that dream.
Welcome to Life as a Patient Doctor. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Moss, navigating life as a patient and a medical doctor. Walk alongside me as I reflect on the challenges and triumphs and lessons I've learned undergoing medical education with invisible disabilities. Join me as I interview other doctors, students, and healthcare workers on their own journeys. Listen to their unique stories on how they balance their health while caring for others in the health profession. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Moss, and I am interviewing Malikiya, who's a second-year medical student at Harvard Medical School. She was born in the beautiful Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago and moved on her own to the United States in 2016 to pursue college. She graduated from UNC Chapel Hill in 2020 as a summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa, an honors in chemistry along with a minor in Spanish and biology. She did a 2-year research fellowship at the National Institute of Health, participating in sickle cell clinical trial research before starting medical school. Welcome.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Ma? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad to speak with you. So tell me a little bit more about your journeys.
Yeah, so some background. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I was born and raised there. And then growing up there, I grew up in the more of a very Black, more lower income community, access to medical care. It was witnessing the disparity in terms of for care, the delivery of health care opportunities, and it inspired me to pursue medicine. I literally was the impetus for wanting me to pursue medicine. And that's a little bit about what really encouraged me originally into medicine. And then I left Trinidad in 2015, basically because it used to be a doctor in Trinidad, but I have was one hand, and there was limitation in terms of what I perceived as opportunities for people with disabilities or people with that looked like myself to have different opportunities to pursue dreams. Just my dream, which is to become a physician. So I left Trinidad on my own and I said, I want to be a doctor if I can be here. I'm not going to be able to save life somewhere else. And so I moved to the United States on my own in 2016. I lived in New York for a while and worked. And then after I applied and I got into to Capitol Hill and I went there for college, I was able to really get a experience into research and what healthcare system looks like in the United States. And at that point, I was a little bit afraid actually about what it meant to pursue medicine because, again, having disability and also not having seen many Black women physicians and more so a Black women physicians that have a visible disability. That's a very unique niche really was something that made me wonder, is it possible to pursue medicine? And interestingly, one of my mentors told me one time we ended up being in the same lab, ironically, at my UNC School of Medicine. And she told me, you do research, you read a lot of papers. What research article that was peer reviewed just told you that one-handed people can be doctors? So I was like, oh, you're really right. There's nobody that really verified. So I was like, and so anyways, it really inspired me to really push through that dream and recognize that like the limitation was the limitation of my mental thoughts of, well, and I wanted to pursue this thing that I know I was capable of and to be able to do the work that I always have dreamt of doing. And yeah, for a couple of years now, I'm a second year medical student at Harvard. That's the kind of journey. I think I pursue medicine and my own journey in medicine. I really
Mm.
working on, again, the remembrance of the resilience and the grit that it took for me to get here into medicine, and also recognizing that, like, when I look around, there's not people that look like me in any capacity in the space that I am. There are 5 Black women in my class of like almost 200 here at Harvard. Only 2.8% of physicians in the United States are Black women or identified. And more importantly, I think of only about like 3% or even less than that are who identify with disabilities. Again, the intersection of that is one number. The odds in theory have always been stacked against me. And even growing up in Trinidad, I could have, for example, been discouraged early on about what the perception is like of physician. When you see doctors in England, they always show 2 hands moving actions, right? They never show a single hand of what it's capable of. But my mission currently is like to show, like, my name is Teacher Dr. Valley, saving lives one hand at a time. I got this to see it. My inspirations here, remember that if there is a dream to do work in the active community, it's always possible with a desire to pursue that dream, but also recognizing that you have to immerse yourself in community and spaces of support. Like, my mom has been an incredible support of my family, getting mentors like who I mentioned before, really telling me about what really the take and capability of doing something. And that's why I tell people, if you want to be a doctor and you feel like you may not be capable, remember you deserve to take up space in places where people might tell you that you may not look like the person who's represented in that space. Representation matters. And if you don't see the representation that's there, become that representation. For what I hope people continue to show that blend differences, different ability statuses still have the capacity to shape and change lives, affect healthcare outcomes in positive ways, be able to a good approach to medicine, the most humanistic approach as possible.
I love that. That's so inspiring, your story. I love that phrase, that Dr. Hines saves.
Dr. Lives one hand at a time.
Wait, what was it?
Dr. Malley saving lives one hand at a time.
Love
With a
it.
stethoscope.
That's amazing. And I think it's so important, like you said, to talk about those intersectionalities, because it stacks when you talk about race, you talk about physical disabilities, or being even a woman. All these different things are different challenges that can present itself. And I love how you mentioned how having a mentor that really inspired you to keep going and get you away from our mindset that kind of really can self-limit us sometimes, like you said, that can really get us thinking like, no, I can't do it. All these negative self-talks that go around in our head. And sometimes we just need someone else to be like, hey, cut it out. Let's think logically. Have you seen a research paper? I love that.
Yeah, that was iconic.
Tell me about different challenges or successes you've had in your journey to date.
Yeah, so I would say a lot of the journey, having one hand in general, it's a challenge. Like, this is a very two-handed world, or a very, you know, you never know how everything requires two hands unless you don't have one. So a lot of things like opening doors, for example, that may be very heavy. But if you have one hand and you have overused one thumb, like, that is severely limiting in terms of active. I still that some challenges that I had on the pursuit of medicine, or maybe like just accepting maybe accommodations to some extent, being able to fulfill accommodations to do things in academic institutions that I've been a part of, and to be able to do things in the clinic. But again, like, being born with one hand rather than maybe having lost my limb. So I've been able to really figure out adapting with time to be able to think outside the box. For example, like when I was studying research when I was an undergrad, hand hold a pipette with one hand and then with another instrument. But like, would you? And hi, my test tube on there, and I yeah, or utilizing gloves that are smaller, or utilizing my upper limb here to be able to hold things, etc. Or do suturing. They actually, right before the meeting, I met a physician, an ED doctor. She also has one hand. She teaches everything. And I was like, you know what? It's just really being able to find those people in the spaces and know that it's possible, and that, yeah, it's hard. But like, these challenges are challenges that some of them I anticipated, some of them were way outside of the box of what I could have ever thought about would be a hardship in medicine, or a hardship in my experience pursuing medicine. But I would say that it's really keeping on my journey of trying to remain positive and surround myself with the community that's really uplifting, support my journey of like, how do I adapt? How do I connect with more allies in the space? How do I find more women, no women of color, POC, or people who identifies with more marginalized identities so that we should be able to support each other. So some spaces where medicine is predominantly like very conservative, very male, very white. Being able to have that in those spaces has been more helpful. I would say my successes came from just having an athlete to say when I was in Trinidad. I've gone through a lot of times in my people have just overstride. Well, I don't know, maybe it's from just innate ableism or just not having the experiential knowledge of what people can do if you don't feel other people work like me. I assume that I just can't do something growing up. I just remember like the first time I really had audacity was when I was younger and I wanted to rock climb and these people had told me I couldn't rock climb. My own mind, like I really believe that like I want to never really rock climb, so I still hands, you can't do that. Anyways, one day I went on a hike and there's a rock climbing activity and I told the person at the rock climbing station said what I wanted to do and everybody around me was like, you can do that. You have one hand. And I remember that day I was like, I can either sit here and believe that I never could do this and I will give myself or remove myself the opportunity to even try. Or I could say, just give me the opportunity to try now. Because the only way I will know if I can do it is to give myself a chance. Anyway, I got rock climb. It was hard pulling yourself up and because it was like free climbing. When I tell you what like that was a lot. But I made it to the top of that mountain. And my success would have been like that was a very significant moment in my life because it was in that moment when I looked down from that mountain at all those naysayers who tried to convince me that I couldn't make it to the top. And they're all below there trying to tell me I couldn't do it. And they're all crying, oh my God, I can't believe you did it. But you know what? I believe. I had the audacity to believe in that moment that I can make it to the top, and I did. And I got there, and anybody that ever thought that they could deny me the opportunities of my dreams or at the bottom of that hill waiting to this day. So I would say that has been an incredible success to be able to really force myself out of my comfort zone, even in the most where it's easy to just give up and just be like, I can't, or people just assume I can't do it. When I left my country on my own in 2016, that took audacity. My family is back in Trinidad, and I see them sometimes, not all the time, but to leave an entire culture and to come into American culture on my own as a person going to the South, being able to adapt an American educational curriculum. When I was in college, there was no Caribbean Students Association of Space that I felt like we would represent. So we created it. You don't see yourself represented, created. I would say that's another success. I did a lot of research working on my number 10 publication. I would say a lot of academic successes. I'm a medical student at Harvard. I got to work at the NIH. I'm doing a research fellowship. I've been really hard working in terms of prioritizing my studies, etc. But I would say the most important successes I've had is being able to remember that my dreams matter, my visions matter, the what impact I can have and will have in the world and in the space of patient care, it does matter. And I'm committed to doing so. And so even though I've experienced these challenges, I've experienced their ableism, I would say, oh, so many things that maybe one day I'll talk about in some book or some op-ed. But I'm not discouraged from the journey because I remember my why medicine, and I think beyond these moments here and those hard things that have happened in life, like I see the vision is clear about patients in the group and that I want to serve and hopefully I'll know what specialty that was so. But that's a little bit of my successes and challenges and how I've overcome it. And I'm still navigating it to this day.
You are amazing and phenomenal. And this is exactly why I wanted you to come and share that because it's so inspiring to hear going through not just like we all struggle with studying or getting into medical school, but talking even outside just the day-to-day world. You saying we live in a two-handed world, and if someone doesn't live with some sort of disability, there's no way that they could think about that. But you, on the other hand, you've taken that and you've been so creative and said, okay, I'm going to make my own rules. I'm going to make my own what I can and cannot do. And that is so uplifting to hear that you've been able to just push away all the negative thoughts and the naysayers, like you said, because they will be there, unfortunately, because that's just life. But that will get you so far in medicine, I'm sure. And I can't wait to see you as Dr. Hines here soon, or Dr. Molly Hines here soon.
Yeah, me too.
I can't believe also the moving to the US at such a young age. That is definitely an interesting path that very few people, I'm sure, has had that big challenge. How did you navigate going into a complete culture change? I think actually a lot of people in the IMG world would probably really like to hear how you managed that transition.
Yeah, that is a really good question. Honestly, it was quite a time because I can think back on it now fondly because I've been through it, but I'm pretty sure when I left Trinidad, I moved to New York, and there's a diaspora for the Caribbean people there, but there's like the New York energy. So it's just okay. New York has a type of culture, but at the end, there's some level of like familiarity between the West Indian diaspora and all these other like people like New York. But then I ended up going to North Carolina, which is I guess I consider it the South. A lot of people don't necessarily call it the South, but then I am engaging with some hospitality and what that very unique experience was like in that condition. And again, being even further away from family. I have maybe some aunts and cousins in New York, but again, in North Carolina, I couldn't go home a lot of times, for example, to see my family in New York or in Trinidad because I just did not have the money. A lot of times when there were break times, I had to stay on campus and it was very like isolating a lot of the moments. And so I would say it was very difficult for that. And also I think because I went to a PWI, the experience of sometimes grouping Blackness into the monolith. For example, I am Black. Yes, I'm Black in America, but for example, as being an African American and having that nuanced experience, I can't say that I've had that because I didn't grow up here. So I think recognizing that how do I again find less spaces of belonging, but also recognition of sometimes that belonging means that you can't just throw yourself into like just main group. How do I have a sense of self and retain some aspects of my culture? Because for example, when I moved to North Carolina, a lot of people did not understand my accent. So it was really hard to communicate. And it was really hard because then I had to start recognizing like how do I say American words, etc. And then that started really affecting me mentally because I started feeling like I had to reject or have experienced almost like firsthand cultural erasure in an effort to be understood and in an effort to be normal in America. And I also am a person with that as Black, I have a disability. So like at some level, like I'm always standing out and speaking that I occupy. I would say that it was very difficult. And then the academic differences. A lot of times in Trinidad, they would go to class and teach you, they'll teach you, and then you go home, go to lessons, you come back. In college, they said, go home, read your book. You come with your thoughts, and that's the knowledge. That was another transition change. And then I would say the main thing was just homesickness, not being able to have any food or be able to like afford to do a lot of the things and leave the area was goal. But it would, even though it was hard, I think I was very committed to making it. I'm very committed to crafting some level of community of support. And so it was really incredible to be able to find those spaces with time. Of course, it wasn't just an immediate thing that I was able to feel like I had people that like actually loved me and uplifted me. I joined this group on my campus with called Sister Park where, groups of Black and brown women or people identified as women would come to the space and just talk about what they were experiencing that week. And it was a space, it was led by one of my great mentors, Dr. D. And it was really my introduction for sisterhood into the community and actually having that space of support and uplifting and recognizing that my experience is hard, but I'm not here by myself. And especially being away from my family, having that space was incredible. And Dr. D, she is a woman of the illustrious organization of Dr. Philip Sorority Incorporated. And I crossed into it, number 6 on my great line. So that has very much been an impetus in terms of maintaining community later on in my life. That's just how I'm about it later on. But that was helpful. Also talking to my mom, my siblings every day, most days on WhatsApp, being able to like utilize our space to be able to have some semblance of connection when I didn't have that space on campus. Recognizing that if I couldn't succeed or I was struggling academically, where were the spaces of seeking help? I think one of the things that I had to narrow, I'd learned, especially in college, was asking for help. For help, meaning the person who has one of the different ability status, a lot of my independence in my life has been trying to prove to myself, at least when I was younger, and I was like, I could do it, so I just didn't ask for help. And I realized at some point I was like really struggling because again, to me, this new space by myself in America, even like in medical school now, being in Boston, transitioning each time I leave, like I left the country, moved to New York, left New York, moved to North Carolina, like starting over like a military child, moved from Boston, moved to DC, left DC 2 years, come now I'm in Boston for medical school. So it's almost like I'm upended it each time, and I have to reestablish a sense of self and my community in each space. That consistent connection with my family back home, being able to talk to my mom and all of that, being able to help some of siblings who are also their physicians, and being able to talk about what their struggle was like in medical school now has been really helpful. Being able to have friends and supporters who love me, mentors who gave me opportunities. My mentor in college was the first one to say, "You should do research. Just let the research that these are opportunities that you should do." They were like, "You know what? Your hand, that's not really an issue. Let's think about how we adapt. Let's think about holding this there, this, but it was when you have people that are committed to and to like uplifting you, it's so much easier to attain your success, even when there's spaces that are not helping you succeed or whatever. Asking for help, at least for me, look like breaking down in my office with my mentor and saying, "This is hard. Like, how can I get resources? How can I connect with the Living Center? How can I go to office hours? How can I ask my professor that he's in college, hi, I'm struggling. Can I get some more time on this?" Being able to find those people on that space that is pouring into me so that I can be able to pour back at other people, I think incredibly beneficial in that journey and culture show.
You said a lot of great things. Like, you talked about how you're getting back to your family and core. Even when you kept moving to all these places, it was so important to find, this is me, this was important to me, community, family, what my dream is. And something that really stood out to me is the learning how to ask for help. I see that as such a common thing that a lot of us who have intersectionalities, whether if that is disabilities, being a Black and brown woman, a lot of us
Mm,
struggle to ask for help because we've worked so long to try to prove to others and prove to even ourselves that we can do something, that we can be just like everyone else or better. And
yeah.
especially that pre-med culture of just having to be better. For individuals who don't know, when I say the pre-med culture, it means that only like 1% of students of pre-meds who apply to medical school in the US actually get in. So that is really hard. That is a very small percent of individuals. So it ends up that people just develop this mindset of having to push themselves, perfectionism. It's so interesting. I was actually just talking to my husband literally today. We bought a boat during COVID. We're not sailors. We don't do
Oh,
anything like that, but we moved to Chicago for medical school. Everything closed. It was a great deal. And that it was like a fixer boat. So we were like, okay, we're going to remove the engine. We're going to redo the paint. That was now 4 years ago. And it still has never been in the water. We went today just to look at it, and we were talking about like how that boat has been a really good representation for both of us of being okay with leaving things unfinished, leaving things
mm,
not perfect, really disconnecting from that concept of needing to prove how awesome. Like, no one was expecting us to build this boat or rebuild this. It really separated us from that like medicine competitive culture and just try something new. So yeah, not recommending that everyone just go randomly buy a boat, but
might go
it's
by.
important to learn because it's hard to ask for help.
Exactly. Sometimes being unfinished might mean that everything's not going to be complete by the deadline, and life is okay. You will be okay. Sometimes you might get an L, you might not pass that exam. Really thinking about how you advocate for yourself really matters, especially in pursuit of medicine when you'll be advocating on behalf of your patients. Advocating for some time. Rest is so important. The undergrad, there was the idea that you don't have to have a 4.0 or whatever to be able to pursue medicine or a 5 looked at us so long ago, but recognizing that it's okay to struggle, it's okay to ask for help. And sometimes, and most times, it's okay to fail because when you fail, at least from my perspective, failure allows you to really think about it more creatively. Of like, okay, this is a happened. How do you think about it in a different role? How do I pursue that opportunity in a different way? Maybe I need to put it. So I think you're so right. This is both being a metaphor for sometimes it's okay to be influenced, but sometimes it's okay to recognize that you can take a pause. Maybe one day you'll go back to that boat and maybe one day it will be in the water. It's not in the water now, but there's so much time for that. There's so much space and there's so much opportunity.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that, especially just that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to fail. If you're not failing, how can you do better? Just like there's always going to be a failure, there's always going to be a success. If you have bad days, there always has to be an opposite. There always will be one good day. It's a spectrum. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah. It was up for me. I think
It made sense in my brain, and then I was like, oh, that. And interesting. Going through your own experience that you've had in your life, your lived experience with physical disabilities, how has it impacted how you connect with patients?
Yeah, that's literally your question. So when I came into medical school at HMR, one of the things that I was wondering about my patient interaction was, should I tell my patient by one hand just to explain, like, maybe in my question, my competence, I'm already a medical student, I'm having all these things that I wondered about. And so what I ended up doing is like recognizing that I ended up not saying anything. I just would show up in a room, illustrate my like regular everyday personality. I clearly am a competent medical student and knowledgeable about at the level in which I'm needed to be, and being able to engage with patients. And I think that being able to like just show that I'm capable of doing just the same role as people who came in with the two hands here and that were quite equivalent confident. I might even argue even more because I just came in again with just, okay, I have to come closer to your eyes because one eye is better worse than the other one. Or maybe if I have to do ultrasound, I might have to hold something differently. At the end of the day, my patients, they're very impressed. I think that they're like, I'm a very, what is the word? They always emphasize how much of a joy it is to be around me and how warm my personality is and how safe the space. I really be intentional about trying to make them feel in terms of being seen, being heard, and trying to address all of the concerns that they come in with, being able to really extend that empathy and that compassion to whatever needs that they have. I feel like that has been so tremendous in it allowing me to show up as myself in the medical space and also acknowledge like my patients understanding that I have one hand, but they have been nothing that I have not been capable of doing within the room and the context because I can. So it usually does not like affect me in any like negative way. It has not like ever like negatively had like direct patient encounters that have been bad actually. It's been very empowering with my patients out of how much of an inspiration I am to them and how they want to connect me with somebody else to like really be like, oh, this person wants to be a doctor. They were praising you. It's super lovely to see you being here. So I think that that's been my interaction with my patients. But in addition to that, being able to work with my patients and being able to think outside the box. How do I adapt and do things? If I have to teach a person, how can I work? Medicine is an individual role, and that's what I really love about medicine. It's a team sport, literally, and it's incredible to be able to learn from the other practitioners and providers around me to be able to get their support in terms of interaction. Also recognizing that patients are here usually in the effort of time to get here, and there's something that is really incredible about the position that you are in as a future medical provider and I would assume as a doctor to be able to hold that space where people are coming to you to get here. I think that illustrating being able to be competent and be confident in the work that I do has been able to work really well with my patient encounters. And I hope to be able to continue that as I learn more about medicine, as I learn more procedures and whatever specialty I end up going into. But that has been, I guess, the role of my disability in the experience, something that has been a challenge in terms of showing up, but also not a limitation in terms of denying the opportunity to really engage with my patients and have a phenomenal interaction. Of course, not all interactions with patients will be the best, and I can't do every single thing, like I said, but that's been my experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is a question that I can see coming up with individuals, whether if that is teammates, classmates, instructors, like how will patients interact? And I'm so glad to hear that they've seen it as you're just another provider, happy and really receptive to your warmth and your intentionality of humanistic medicine and patients that are cared. I think that is the most wonderful and empowering thing to remember, that it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what things you can and cannot do or society says you cannot do. You can still help individuals. You can still follow your dreams. You can still achieve your dreams, which is so important.
Yeah.
As we start to wrap up, is there any pearls of wisdom you would like to impart to other individuals in medicine who maybe have physical or invisible disabilities?
Yeah. So my pearl of wisdom being teacher Dr. Malley saving lives in one hand. But no, seriously, I think for me, my pearl of wisdom would be take up space. I tell people that all the time. Take up space. It because there would always be somebody or some people or some people that try to discourage you from pursuing things that you may not even wonder if you're capable of doing it. But you will never know if you can be doing something unless you try. Give yourself a chance to try. At least try. Be the one. Don't give yourself the no. My mom always says if you want to apply to something, let them tell you no. Don't deny yourself the opportunity before you go. Give yourself a chance to try. Asking for help because this is not an individual specialty or like something that you have to do alone. Life is not also something that you have to do alone. There are people and there's community and spaces to be able to support you and uplift you. You're also more than just a medical opinion. At least for me, I think of myself more than just a medical opinion. I'm so much more of an individual outside of just my role as a future provider. I'm a dog mommy. I have so much more and I have a lot to offer. And I encourage people to always remember how much you have to offer the world, how much you have to offer your patients, and to be reminded that you deserve to be here, even if you don't see yourself reflect. And remember, representation matters. If you don't see the representation, and you have the capacity and the bandwidth to do it, be that representation. Open that door and proceed. It will be hard. I'm not gonna lie. I've had a hard time, in medicine, having more hands and being the first in my school. However, to have a single hand and pursue medicine. But I will say that opening the door is something that is so much more powerful when you open the door for yourself, or at least widening a little bit. You have the capacity to hold the hands of people behind you to make that door wider for the future generation. That's the courage, or that's the word of wisdom that I would read. Take up space. You matter.
Take up space, you matter, representation matters. I love those. Those were so wonderful and so important. I want to thank you, Malikiya, for sharing all your story and journey. It is so helpful to hear from other individuals who have made it, who have been resilient, and to hear that they can do it, that they've been through stuff and it's okay. And I think that is so important. One of my motivations for this podcast is to really show people they're not alone in their struggle. If this is a form of community or just encourage a community, it's helpful to hear that other people exist in the struggle. So thank you
Yeah.
so much. I'm going to finish off by summarizing. You talked about growing up in Trinidad and moving to the United States in 2016 all on your own. You talked about the difference of being a Black woman from Trinidad versus being maybe an African American woman here in the US and just growing up with those different identities. I think that is really powerful, especially for other Black individuals who come from other countries or don't grow up in the American system. I think provides a lot of power to individuals to hear that they're not alone in that difference. You also talked about that transition to college and med school, how the different intersectionalities really took part, but you were able to find research mentors, community members, sisterhood, finding people that either looked like you or had similar experiences, and that really motivated you to keep going and to find that grounding that we need when we're struggling. I really liked that you talked about how you grew up with one hand, so you were used to the idea of making your own things work for you. This is a two-handed society, and you always found a way to do things. Same thing when you got to medical school. You need a suture? Okay, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's not this whole new thing. It's just that resilience and that practice of just trying to figure out how you'll do things. It's creative. You finished off by really talking about how important it is to take up space and be who you are. And it's okay if you're the only one. Representation matters. Being in a room and having your voice heard is important for other people, maybe that do not have the voice to be able to stand up for their needs. And I am so thankful for you really sharing all that you went through. I really think it will connect with a lot of individuals. If individuals want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, feel free to follow me on Instagram. My name is Malikiya, and my LinkedIn, Malikiya Hines. Feel free to message me and connect. I share a lot of my story about my experience and my journey in medicine on there, and I'm also getting a prosthesis. Walk me on the journey of what it is like to, again, have a living difference in medicine and what that is for adapting daily life. Those are places you can connect with me. And yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share some of my story and to be able to like engage with your incredible audience, to be able to remind you all that you matter, you can be a doctor if that's something that you dream of doing, and to pursue your dreams.
Yes, thank you. I'll make sure to link your Instagram and your LinkedIn, and that is so exciting. I can't wait to follow you on your journey of getting a prosthesis and seeing how that new adaptation goes. That sounds so exciting.
Yeah, we'll see.
It'll be a new experience for sure.
Literally.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in today. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Life as a Patient Doctor because we have plenty more medical students, doctors, pharmacists, caseworkers, social workers. We have a whole bunch of individuals who have been willing to share their story. We're really trying to just humanize medicine and show that your profession is not just who you are. There is so much more. That could be a disability, that can be a health condition, that can be having kids while studying. There's so many different aspects that have made the people that they are today and lead them to have a unique perspective when they treat and care for others. Thank you all so much. If you haven't already, follow me on all the social media at medpsychmoss. And then I also have a website, medpsychmoss.com, where you can see my blog, new worksheets. I even shared my personal statement for residency. So if you're getting there for residency or close, check that out. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope to see you all next time. Take care.
Bye.